paradigm shift is a term that's fairly new to me. I mean, I've heard it, but didn't really think much about it and think about applying it to my life. But um, my colleague and the guy I work for at BitSource, Rusty Justice, when we were traveling a while back, he was pointing out paradigm shifts to me, and it almost became a game. And so the first one he pointed out was on a FedEx truck, and he said, "Do you see an arrow when you look at that sign?" And I looked and looked and looked and looked and looked, and I did not see an arrow until he pointed it out. So if you see here, I've circled the arrow between the E and the X pointing to the right. And so he said, "Tracy, once you have a paradigm shift, you always see it differently. You'll never go back to seeing it the way it was before." I was like, that's interesting. And so then the Amazon logo. What's interesting about the Amazon logo?
The
The
smile.
the arrow looks like a smile, which you're happy, but it's pointing from A to Z. So they sell anything you want from A to Z. It's your place to go for anything. And so those are a couple of business logos that once you see them differently, that's you could think of that as being a paradigm shift. But a paradigm shift, some different ways of explaining it. I want you to think about it in different ways. A time when the usual and accepted way of doing or thinking about something changes. So the FedEx sign, I've seen it for years and years and years. I had never seen the arrow, and now every time I see it, the arrow just pops out at me. And the same with the Amazon sign. I see that as a smile because I'm happy that I can find anything I need from A to Z. Another definition is a trend or a change in the typical pattern or model. So if you think of something that has been done a certain way for a long time, that could be considered a paradigm. It's our way of doing things. It's our model. It's our pattern at work. We a lot of times have these ways that things have been done for years and years and years. And one example of that is when I taught um, at Betsy Lane, we did bus duty a certain way. And then I transferred schools and moved to Pikeville. And their way of doing bus duty was totally different. And sometimes I would say, why do we do this way? I would question it because I'd seen other ways. And they were like, this is how it's always been done. And you just don't change the tradition. Very entrenched in tradition and doing things the exact same way that it had always been done, even if perhaps it wasn't the safest way or the most efficient way. And so, general uses says in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Thomas Kuhn describes a paradigm as a set of beliefs, theories, or worldview that is unquestioningly accepted and has been uh, established as truth. And a paradigm shift is a change in that existing standard model, which creates a shift in the established truth. And it's not always well received, it's not always accepted. And so that bus duty situation was we did not have enough teachers to cover bus duty because teachers who had homerooms never had to do bus duty. It was only the teachers who did not have a homeroom. And there are fewer of those teachers. And so the burden of um, responsibility, the burden of being at school early or staying late, all of the responsibility fell on fewer people. And those few people had that responsibility every single day. It was not rotated. And a year or two after I left that school, after I retired, they had a paradigm shift and it was not well received because all of those teachers who had to start doing bus duty who had never had to do it before, they were not happy. And so a paradigm shift can sometimes um, be painful, but sometimes it's well received. Here we see it as we must take on new assumptions and expectations that will transform our theories, traditions, rules, and standards of practice. We must create a new paradigm in which we are able to solve the insolvable problems of the old paradigm. So, by having more teachers and having um, less, that responsibility spread out over a larger group, um, it was changing those traditions and the rules and the standards that had been in place, but it did help solve a lot of those problems that we had with the old paradigm. And so here you can see the little chick breaking out of the egg. Um, that tradition, what was the norm for that little chick before it hatched, was very different. But oftentimes, the paradigm shift is a move in a better, more positive direction. And so let's look at some paradigm shifts that have happened in, fairly recently. If you think about technology and how technology has forced so many changes, especially during 2020 when the pandemic hit, so many systems had to shift in order to survive. And I think about schools and they had to, I've heard many people in education say we had to build the plane as we were flying it. They had to figure out how to teach kids when they couldn't have them in the classroom, or if they had to have them seated so far apart. And so different schools took on different approaches. Some had virtual learning where the students were at home. Some had days where kids came in smaller numbers and they were on a rotation where they came 1 or 2 days a week. But that was a huge learning curve for students, families, teachers. And then you think about text messaging. I can literally remember when I first started teaching, not when I first started teaching, but when I was teaching and we first got email. And Becky and Teresa may remember this. We were at Betsy Lane and they did a workshop after school one day and taught us about email. And I honestly came back to my room and thought, why on earth are we getting that? I don't see any way that will ever be useful. And now, every single day I'm bombarded with emails. It is a huge way of communication that I wasn't used to because it wasn't tradition. It wasn't part of my normal. And so much of that now is even done in texting. So rather than email someone, I'll send them a quick text message because it's so much faster. And then we think about e-commerce. We can shop all over the world now with the punch of a button. We can purchase things from Africa or anywhere around the world, and it's opened up global markets where people living at home making crafts have customers all over the world. And online banking, if you think about how banking has changed, you can write checks through your computer or send checks, and you can cash checks and deposit checks, and so many different things you can do, transfer money with just the click of a button. And so we have had to change the way we think about things, and many of those are for the good. But when we think about a paradigm shift, it's made up of skills, attitudes, and knowledge. And our skills are our ability to perform a task or activity that can be measured in time and precision. So what are our skills? What do we have to do? What are the tasks we have to complete? And how can we measure those? And then the attitudes. What are our feelings or emotions or beliefs or values about something? So my value for email in the beginning was I saw no value in it at all. My belief was that I would never take time away from my students to go over to my computer and pull up this, whatever it was, in my mind at that time, and send a message to someone who might just be down the hallway. The scope of how I saw it was so limited. The scope of how it could be used was very, very limited. So my feelings were negative, and I was very closed-minded. to that. And then the knowledge is the condition of being aware. I don't think I had the knowledge of the capacity it could have and the connections it could give me um, with educators all over the United States because I had never used it before. I wasn't aware of its capacity. And then those things can become habits. When the paradigm shift really takes hold and the change is made, it's when it becomes a habit. So aspects of the behavior are repeatedly and consistently done without effort or conscious thought. And so I think when we start thinking about how we are going to change an attitude, we're going to take our knowledge and what we know to be true, and then we're going to apply our skills so that change can actually happen. So let's look at Romans 12. Well, not Romans 12, but just the book of Romans, but focusing mainly on chapter 12, verse 2. So Paul wrote to the church in Rome, and as Paul points out in Romans 1, people are enslaved to a debased mind, futile in their thinking, darkened by senseless minds, which results in doing every kind of evil to one another. That salvation is liberation from this slavery of the mind, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. And so if we think about this from the lens of a paradigm shift, the paradigm is that we as humans living in the world have debased and senseless minds, and we're futile in our thinking, and we do evil. That's our natural instincts. However, the paradigm shift comes after we get saved. After salvation, we are liberated. So we're free from that type of thinking, or at least we should be. But sometimes we keep picking it back up. So let's look at Romans 12:2. That's going to be one of our main verses. I want you to put some translation of this verse in your journal this week. So the King James says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God." So instead of "be not conformed to this world," the NLT says, "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world." And then the Message says, "Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking." And I think sometimes that's where we are. We're so used to doing something. Maybe it's culturally accepted, or maybe it's something that we've seen modeled for us for years and years. And that's just what we know to be the norm. And so we are adjusted to that and we are comfortable there. But it says, "Be transformed." And then the NLT says, "Let God transform you into a new person." And then the Message says, "You'll be changed from the inside out." And then how do we do that? By the renewing of your mind. And then the NLT, by changing the way you think. And the Message, readily recognize that what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. So we have to quickly recognize when our mind is not in the right place and when we need to change the way we think. And then what does that do? That we may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And then NLT, then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. We have to know. We can't just constantly rely on our old habits and our old mindsets and our old paradigms that we're comfortable with. But we have to readily recognize and change the way we think so that we can. And then this last one in the Message, unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity. So we're to be mature Christians. And we can only do that by growing. And part of that growth, I'm convinced, is by changing the way we think. And God brings the best out of you, develops well formed maturity in you. So that's what we want. We don't want to be like the culture around us, being dragged down, but letting Him develop us and mature us. And that's where the paradigm shift comes. So sometimes we hold these beliefs as true, and you can read them. These are things that just popped in my mind that I hear other people say, or I feel myself, or I see on Facebook, or I see on TV. Life will never improve. It's always going to be like this. Some people think things have to be perfect all the time, and if it's not perfect, then there's no margin for error. They think they're not good enough. They can't teach Sunday school. They can't do it as good as somebody else, or they can't, whatever, fill in the blank. Their comparison, thinking someone is better than them. This is just how I am. I can't change. I was born this way. We've all heard that. I feel so alone. I need to do something to fix the problem. That's me. I'm always thinking I'm supposed to do something. This person will never change. That's just how they are. God can't do anything with them. We don't really say that, but that's what we think when we give up on someone ever being different. God can't or won't intervene. I've thought that before. He just can't. This problem is too much, or this is just such a waste. Something happens and it just doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem right, and we just feel like it's wasted. But with God, nothing is wasted. But we can change the way we think. So the paradigm shift changes the way I think about these things and how I respond to these different situations. And so you can see here all of the different scriptures that apply to those thoughts that this girl was having previously. And I'm not going to read through all of those, but you can see for every thing that we think, there's a scripture that aligns with it. And then in Isaiah 43, especially verse 19, but 19 through 21, see, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? It's like He wants us to have a paradigm shift. Don't we see? Can't we see it? He wants to do something new. I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. The wild animals honor me, the jackals and the owls, because I provide water in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. I give drink to my people, my chosen, the people I transformed for myself, that they may proclaim my praise. So the journaling ideas for this week, I thought about a butterfly and how it completely transforms from a caterpillar, then to the chrysalis and then into the butterfly. And they don't look anything alike. They are totally transformed. And then this picture of the fish, the goldfish, jumping from a pot, it made me think about, how we are so comfortable trying to fit into this world and be like everyone else. So this fish, it has more color. It's a different coloration, and it wants to jump over into a different bowl and change, to be transformed. And that's what we're to do. We're to be different, and we are to I think that's just a good image of how we can be individual and unique. And the Bible says we're to be different, and so changing our thoughts and making it a habit, I think, is a good thing. So this fish is a good little drawing. And then up at the top, it says, look, I'm about to do something new. And I liked that, the stripe look, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. Hopefully it'll work out the way I have it planned, but I'm going to show you now my journal. Okay, so let me move it down here. To make the stripes, I actually watched a tutorial video on this, You use some washi tape because washi tape, if you don't let it stay on there a long time, it's removable. So hopefully this hasn't been on there. I did do it a couple hours ago. So hopefully it'll tear back off. But use a washi tape that you're not crazy about or some painter's tape. And you're going to start at the bottom, put down your tape, and then lay another piece down and mark. So I'm going to show you how I do that. I'm going to lay this piece down, not stick it all the way down, but then I'm just going to lightly mark the edges, peel it back up, and line it up on those lines so that I'm getting these negative spaces the same distance. So by laying that down, this is the same distance for each of these. And then I'm going to do one more little piece. Right here. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I laid a piece down, stuck a piece down, and then I laid the tape, marked it, and picked it back up, and then laid another piece. So that was just my little guide. Before I did all that, I wrote out my Bible verse and I covered it with tape because I want that to be white, and it's going to be hard to write on top of that. So here you can see where I wrote paradigm shift, the name of this lesson. I'm just going to take some of this tape and cover that up. So now the tape is going to be the blocker for this ink. And I'm using blue and red ink. You could do this with colored pencils as well though, or watercolor. I did put down the white gesso on the bottom just to protect the page. And if I had decided to paint, it wouldn't run through and bleed through. So I'm using this blue ink. Hopefully it's juicy enough to work, and a makeup sponge. And I'm just going to go halfway up the page. So I'm going to think about halfway, and I'm just going to blot this ink all in those spaces. You could do it darker, lighter, toward the edges or up here in the corner, however you want to do it. I'm just going to try to get some blue in all these spaces. Okay, then I'm going to take the red and use a different piece of the sponge. Get some of the red going. And I'm just going to let those overlap a little bit, because you know what colors red and blue make? Purple. So you're just going to let those overlap as you come up toward the blue. Of course, doing this with watercolor would probably be quicker. Get that color down faster. So you can see here how the purple starts coming together there where it overlaps. Then you just gently pull the washi tape back off. And everywhere you had that, there should be a white space. And that is starting to pull my page. So let me try to be gentle with it. Apparently this tape is a little stickier than I should have used. Use some tape that you have that maybe isn't as sticky as the rest. So I'm not going to make you watch me do all of this, but I am going to take off this part here where you can see the Bible verse. But if you do this at home, do not let your tape sit as long as I did, because washi tape at first will tear off really easy, but the longer it's on there, the tighter it gets. So that's why in your journal it doesn't peel off as easy after you've had it in on there a while. So you can see how my verse is underneath the tape. All right. So then you're going to take a just a marker. And you remember how we've done this before, how we just make a box around it like this to make a frame. When I pull this off, that's going to come all the way over and I'll finish it out. But then I'll have these stripes going down the page. The next idea is to take pocket, and butterflies are going to be my theme for my page. And to make a pocket, it's pretty simple. You just take I'm using one of these little pieces of 4.5 by 6.5 paper. You can just use a scrap of any paper. Fold it up, maybe a 1/2 inch on the bottom, and just decide how big you want your pocket to be and turn it in a little bit. Then take your scissors and cut that corner off, just like that, on both sides. So then when you fold this up and you fold this in, you can see you've got that mitered edge and it keeps it from being so bulky. My pocket's going to go right here after I get this tape all off. It's going to hide a little bit of my stripe, but that'll be okay. If I get some of it going, you'll see. It'll be like that. And then on this side, I wrote out Romans 12:2. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I'm doing the caterpillar, drawing the caterpillar. So I started out by drawing the branch. I just brought it all the way up and did a little fat caterpillar on there. With some little legs. And that part of his head that's going to be black. That part will be black. And then I'm going to do the yellow and black and white stripes. This will be a monarch, I think. And then I did the same thing down here at the bottom. Then I wrote out my words and came in from the bottom and did another branch. And then this was so easy. It's just like an egg shape. And then almost like ladybug wings. Just let it be attached there. And I'm going to color this brown so that it looks like, the cocoon or the chrysalis. And then for the butterfly, you can draw a butterfly. You can do this any way you want. But I had these little butterflies I'd bought at Dollar Tree, and they come with one on top of the other. So if you see that, you've actually got 4 butterflies there if you use this for this type of project. And this one's kind of made out of cellophane. And I'm going to glue it right here in the crease between these 2 pages so that, and I'm not going to do it just yet because of this tape. I have to get this tape all picked off, and then I want to color this first. But right here in this space, I'm going to glue the butterfly wing down in there using the Fabri-Tac or Fabri-Fix or 3-in-1. All those glues by Beacon are pretty much the same. I'm going to put some glue right here in the middle. And if you draw a butterfly, and do it on pegboard type paper, I think it'll work good. But leave the wings unattached and just glue that down in there real tight. Hold it until it dries. So then every time you open this page, that is going to be like 3-dimensional. And so this is reminding me in the pocket, I need to tell you what I'm going to do on the pocket. I'm going to use just plain index cards, and I'm going to write some of those paradigms that I need to have shift in my head. Some of those thought processes that I told you, and then scripture that goes along with it. It reminds me very much of this lesson that we had a long time ago about the voice of truth. That was back in February of 2021. But what is my negative mind chatter? And what is the voice of truth? So what is it that I'm thinking that needs to change? And what are the scriptures that apply to that. And you can see that I've, I did a whole bunch of those. And it's going to be that same concept, but I'm just going to write them out on index cards and put them down in this little pocket that I've made.